This conference will now be recorded.
We'll call this meeting to order. And we'll start out with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. All right, before public comments, I'd just like to have something prepared that I'd just like to just to read off if I could.
Can I just remind
Absolutely.
real quick, can you just remind people that the meeting's being recorded?
Yeah.
So,
All right, this meeting is being recorded. Is there anyone else in the here that's today recording? No? Okay. All right, and with that, it is with a heavy heart that I make this statement. Since the horrific shootings in Uvalde, Texas, many parents and members of the Auburn community have naturally asked, what is the Auburn Public School District in town doing to keep our children safe in our schools? Superintendent Dr. Beth Chamberlain addressed this at the school committee meeting on June 1st. She gave an overview of some of the measures that have been in place in our schools and the steps that our school department and town have taken to prepare for a potential catastrophic incident. While we can't disclose specific measures that are in place for public safety reasons, I want to assure the residents that extensive training has been and will continue to be implemented, and ongoing emergency planning and regular review are done to ensure that our plans are up to date. Some strategies that I can mention that the school department and town have undertaken are that the school superintendent's safety advisory committee, has been in place for over 15 years and meets regularly. This consists of school administration, police, fire, building officials, and school facility personnel. School-based safety teams are in place and meet regularly. The multi-hazard plan is reviewed each year for each school building, which addresses such incidents as bomb threats, fire safety, active shooter, evacuation sites, and more. This plan is reviewed also by police and fire. ALICE training for the teachers and administration has been in place and has been taking place in the schools since 2017. ALICE is an acronym for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate, the 5 strategies to deal with an active shooter. Town administration has held in 2014. I have spoken with some teachers, and I've been told firsthand that this training is very hard on the teachers and the staff. I fully appreciate that fact, but unfortunately, it is a necessary training that has to be done. Mechanisms on entry doors regularly checked and upgraded when needed. There's surveillance cameras in use in the schools and the municipal facilities. Our police department has school safety officers that are regularly in the schools, and I do have to say this town has really great community policing. Ongoing review of safety protocols, communication mechanisms, and emergency plans. The school and town update these regularly and are always evaluating and improving when it's needed. I will be seeking that the town manager updates this board on this matter over the next year, and I do ask that town leadership looks for grants, looks for ways to improve on already great community policing strategies, and otherwise continue to work diligently to protect our town and residents and our children. I'm sure that this shooting affected many of you the way that it did me, and I'll speak for the entire town administration when I say that the town administration will do everything in its power to prevent violence in our schools and in our public buildings. Through the town manager to any department heads, I can tell you that at least myself personally, no good ideas will be turned down. If you have anything that you think could help this situation, you will absolutely have my full support. That's it. Thank you. All right, and moving on to public comments. I don't believe that we have any this evening. Nope. Okay. All right, and public hearing. So we'll move to the motor vehicle class 2 license. Coretta Incorporated. I hope I said that correctly. Okay. All right, you're welcome to join us or to the podium. Okay. All right. So the meeting is being conducted. Remotely. However, we do have a full board here, so there's no board members taking place virtually.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to open the hearing.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. You have the floor, sir.
All right. Just
as I described in the application, what I'm looking for is class two dealer license. For those who may don't know, well, was here before for other meeting. Right now I own a auto rental company in Worcester, and I'm looking to open another location here in Auburn, 317 South Ridge Street. And I also requested a dealer license because once I get the vehicle off the fleet, I typically run into the auction, and that being said, I need a dealer license for that. Occasionally, I do have a customer who also request to buy some of our vehicles, now more than ever, for the vehicle shortages out there. And that's what I'm here for, so hopefully you guys okay with that.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any questions or comments from the board members?
So you mentioned no repair on site, or
No
is
repair,
it just
no.
cosmetic repair? Or?
Customer, yes, basic, small thing, nothing related with fluid, I should say oil. Like as an example, broken tail light, thing of that nature.
So repairs are done off-site, or?
Right, it will be 205 Cambridge Street in Worcester. We own a repair shop there. A major work will be done there.
Thank you.
No one else? Okay. And do the board members have the memorandum from the DCG in their packets? Okay. All right, so I would need a motion.
Make a motion to close the hearing.
Second.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And I'd need another motion to allow or deny.
I'll make a motion to approve the license, provided that all applicable requirements of the state and town and any of its departments, boards, and commissions have been fulfilled. Said license is subject to all the conditions stated upon it. Failure to comply with any and all the conditions shall invalidate the license and render it null and void, and with the conditions of the DCG to be placed on the license.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll make up a motion to move up agenda items 6A, 6B, and 6C.
I believe we're going to hold off on that for
Okay.
just a minute.
Sure. I withdraw the motion.
All right, go on
Through
to,
the chair, we could go in order and go with Audit, who is participating and can introduce him.
all right. Very good. All right, so going to agenda item 3B, presentation of the fiscal year 2021 budget audit. Tom Scanlon, with that, I'll move to the town manager.
Thank you. Tom Scanlon is our auditor, and he's been under contract with the town for several years now. And I'm going to let our CFO and Assistant Town Manager introduce him because he works closely with him.
Thank you, Julie, and to the members of the board. I'd like to introduce Tom Scanlon. I see him on the dashboard. He is participating remotely, and he's going to present the findings of the financial audit for period ending June 30th, 2021, known as our fiscal year 21. I believe the audit presentation and findings tonight made by Mr. Scanlon will reflect Auburn's continued improvement in general fund undesignated fund balance, as well as maintain and add to our healthy reserves, which results in a higher DOR certification of our free cash and retained during to your comments. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hopefully everyone can hear me okay.
We can hear you fine.
Absolutely.
All right, cool. So this year, it's always been a tough year all around with just COVID and everything else. I thought the audit went very, very well, like it usually does. We had no material findings, no material. You should congratulate for that. As I walk through your financial statement, I kind of want to, on pages 16 and 17 of the report. these are your ND-wide financial statements. Governments are rather unique. They actually have two sets of financial statements. One's on a full accrual basis and one's on the modified accrual. This is on the accrual basis. This will give you fixed assets. It'll recognize depreciation, where depreciation is not factored into your budget. It's represented here. These are kind of like probably useful for accountants as we look some of the things to pull off of here. When we go into your net position, under unrestricted, first column under governmental activities, you'll see a negative 42 million. Usually net position you don't want to see in a negative. But the two drivers of this is the OPEB liability and the net pension liability. As you go up under non-current, you see the OPEB under 2 million. And the town did adopt an OPEB trust, which you're funding at a pretty good clip. I think it contributed $400,000 in fiscal year 21. Liability, you are on a funding schedule with the county. So those are the two drivers of the unrestricted being a negative. Again, OPEB is more as you think over time. It's really long-term thinking, which you've established, and it really has underlying policies and procedures around your OPEB trust and how you're handling it, more than most communities, which is good to see. So I don't know if anyone has any kind of questions on these two statements. I know they're kind of more. That was good to relate back to. These are your financial statements on a current basis, on a modified accrual, and this will show you where your free cash and your reserves are coming from. And it's always good to see as management is how it relates back to your financial statements that get certified free cash. So if you look at the general fund, and you can see under general fund, you have unassigned 22.8 million. This was certified, I believe, at 17.3 million. And the stabilization fund at June 30th was about 3.8 million. The difference between the other things you got to add to it is that the state, from a point of view, is very conservative. They'll take away your overlay balance, which is about 1.3. And then these are on GAAP financials, where the accruals for state receipts and stuff is about 213. So that will come back to the 22.8 million line, which is very, very healthy for a community. A general rule of thumb is that unassigned fund balance, a good benchmark, should be 10% of your budget. As bond rating agencies look at you in the bond benchmark, and you're way above that. You're approaching about 20%, which is outstanding. So your policies around your financial planning are working, and it's representative on these financial statements. As you can see, 22.8 million unassigned in your free cash. The way you're utilizing it, it's pretty sound policies around it. And on page 23 is your budget versus actual. And as management of a town, you always want to see where your free cash is being generated from. You see on the top half is your revenues, and you see the final budget as your recap is set, and then an actual basis. So what contributed to free cash in fiscal year 21 is $1,657,000 on the revenue side. You're very, very conservative, which is from an audit standpoint, from just a financial DOR, bond rating agencies. That's what we like to see. You don't want to be setting your revenues right up to where you're generating a negative free cash. So you're very conservative. And as you go through a thing like COVID, as representative of a community that has sound financial practices, that if you have a dip in your revenues, you won't be hurt as much. And again, representative, I can't say enough. Fundamentally sound your budgets are and how you project out. And then on the expenditure side, we turned back about 1.6 million in expenditures, and it's kind of spread out amongst all the categories. So the total free cash that was generated in this fiscal year's budget is about 3.3 million. And then you add it to the unspent free cash, about 14.1. That's where you come back to the 17 million. I don't know if anyone has any questions, particularly on that.
Nope.
And the only thing I would say is comes from, we so kind of what we do, just give you a kind of a general, as we look at, if you go back to page 19 and we look at your financial statements, your two biggest assets in there are your cash investments and your receivables. So we spend a lot of time, treasurer's office, looking at your reconciliations. As a firm, we feel cash recs are very important. As money comes in, they're being recorded to the bank. And as you spend money, it's being processed on a warrant that's being signed off by management on all the approval process. So if you feel like your cash is balanced, the rest is just kind of geography on your financial statements. And we're spending a lot of time with the receivables, making sure they're balanced and the paper bills are being properly received into the system, being deposited timely. So a lot of our testing, our substantial testing is done at the bank statement level and the accounts receivable level. And then also, as we look at your revenues for the general fund, where we're spending a lot of our time is on intergovernmental and on property taxes. So, for instance, if a grant gets recorded by the state, we want to make sure it's not ending up in the general fund. It's ending up in the appropriate fund, the expenditures going along with it. So we'll tie out, we're going to report from the state what they gave you for state revenue, and we're tying that out to make sure it's in the proper fund. So as you look on risk on your financial statement, that's kind of the thing to lie. If you're getting a grant, it's going to a special revenue fund, it's not going to the general fund. And also on the cash side, it's being properly balanced in the receivables. That's what we kind of do in assessing your risk. So, and that's kind of it in a nutshell. Not sure if you have any questions on anything.
Thank you for that, Tom. Board members, do you have any questions?
Were there any recommendations or improvements that were advised?
Yeah, as we went through some of the things we talked about with the financial team was on the employee functions, maybe doing more of a deeper recon review into the payroll withholding, specifically the dental. So we recommended that, and also is on the free cash side of the state, there were some deficit accounts that just aren't clearing out that took place over 2 years. The state reduced your free cash and penalties were approximately like 87,000, which is not material to your financials. We want to recommend going through some of those and trying to clear up those deficit accounts.
Thank you.
A couple of comments, and thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. We've already met with regards to the findings in the management letter, some of the items that Tom had spoke about this evening, and we've already put we did a review, and we're making some audit adjustments to reflect some of those deficit balances that we have been carrying for some time. It makes it difficult because a lot of times there's a lag period on the withholding because retirees are paying in. So we have to analyze that, take that into consideration. We've already made adjustments in the agency accounts and those withholding accounts, Tom, just to let you know. And we're currently working with the departments on addressing some of the special revenue deficits that may result in some audit entries. One other thing that I would like to reiterate, which I think is important, is, and Tom mentioned it, our overlay surplus has a balance of 1.3. And when they certify your free cash, that actually is an offset to deferred revenue. So our free cash position could be higher than what it is now if we address our overlay surplus. So I think we're going to come up with a strategy and maybe appropriate some money from overlay surplus to fund some of our reserves, bring that back down, and hopefully that will have a positive effect on our free cash and bring that back up. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach. But that's something we will be discussing in the coming months and maybe have a warrant article on for the fall town meeting.
Not necessarily pertaining to the audit, but the OPEB, like, how do we decide on how to fund that? Is that based on a percentage of outstanding liabilities there, or is it based on?
So since we implemented our financial policy and there was a brief, or there was a one-year reduction of OPEB down to 400 is because of COVID. We cut $1.3 million out of the budget. Knowing that, we had some revenue loss and we had to rely on that to fund a portion of our annual budget. But we're funding roughly $500,000 a year, and then we have an opportunity to do a supplemental budget based upon our free cash position. So we've appropriate anywhere from 500 typically to 650. This is a long-term strategy, and quite honestly, our rate of return on our investment is going to move that needle either one way or another on whether or not we're going to do it in a shorter term or a longer term. So it all depends on our rate of return investment. Certainly, you're going to, with the economy, that's going to, hopefully, it's going to be higher, our rate of return. You're seeing interest rates go up, and you're also seeing what we're getting on our investments, traditional investments that should be going up. So that's something that we're going to monitor, and we take that very seriously. Our OPEB liability, like Tom said, combined with our retirement is about $41 million. And I was surprised to see it was that low. I thought OPEB alone was somewhere in the 50 range, but they have to offset that against our investment as well. So that's something that we continue to focus on and that we will address in the coming years.
And through the chair, if I can add, in the last round of contract negotiations, we worked really well with all the unions, and just about every contract has an OPEB contribution for employees, as well as the non-union employees. So we are actually starting to chip away at it a little bit through employee contributions, because that fund is what's going to fund their retirement. So recognizing that, the employees have a vested stake of interest in that, we've been working very well with the unions to try to address that through employee contributions.
No, I kind of heard there's some guidelines or what you've been providing over the years. Is there a limit, or if there was a need, we could increase that? I know you said you're looking at what the rate of return is, but is there a limit to what we can contribute in any given year?
No. But it's going to come to a point when we reach a benchmark, and this is where we have to set up a OPEB policy team. You can start using a portion of that investment to slow down the rate of growth on your annual health care insurance. So I don't think we have to get to the point where we're fully funded, but when we get further down the road, that's something we need to consider in cost for health insurance.
Thank you.
And as Ed has said, our priority at the fall town meeting when we look at either stabilization or free cash is to make an infusion on top of what we put in the operating budget for OPEB, because it is important. That liability, 500 sounds like a lot every year, 500,000, but it's not when you have a liability of 40 million.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you again, Tom. I don't think any votes are needed on this. This was just a presentation.
Correct, yeah. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
All right, thanks. Good night. Have a good
Good night.
night.
And moving on to communications, we have none. And moving on to really the reason we're all here tonight. We have a vote to confirm Todd Lemon as Chief of Police. Under the town charter, the Board of Selectmen confirms the appointment of the chief. And I myself have known Chief Lemon since I was a young man, since I was causing trouble in this town. So I'm really excited to take this vote.
Through the chair, if I may, I know it falls under the selectmen, but I just want to make the formal recommendation So in your packet, I just gave this to you tonight, so I'm just going to read it quickly for the public. I just want to make sure that everyone understands the reason that we're recommending Todd Lundgren to be chief of police. So the ability to develop and build a strong leadership team is really key to the operations of town government and the successful implementation of any of our plans, projects, and initiatives. The authority to appoint department heads is one of the most important roles of the town manager. Likewise, per the charter, the role of the Board of Selectmen in confirming department heads is one of the most critical votes that you would take as well. In the realm of public safety, it's vital to have a police chief who can not only manage the daily operations and administration of the police department, but can develop and implement a vision for the future of the department. The police chief needs to ensure that the department can continue to respond to the needs of the Auburn community, provide professional services, and uphold all local, state, and federal laws and regulations in order to protect the citizens of the community. Following the retirement of former Police Chief Andrew Slucas, I appointed then Lieutenant Todd Lundgren to the position of Provisional Chief of Police, and that was effective February 1st. As the Auburn Police Department is a civil service organization, the permanent appointment of the chief is contingent and subject to civil service regulations. As such, we held an assessment center in mid-April for the position of police chief. Provisional Chief Lundgren was not only the only candidate who participated in the Chief's Assessment Center, but he scored the best of all the candidates in the Assessment Center. And I say that lightly, but I think it's really important to note that there were no other candidates, and I think that's a testament to his leadership, that the department was not looking to bring in a different chief. The department was happy with Provisional Chief Lundgren and therefore supportive of his future appointment. Just a couple more things. Civil Service formally released the list to us June 1, so that's why I am proud to be here tonight and very excited to make the recommendation to appoint Todd Lundgren as Auburn's next permanent chief of police. Provisional Chief Lundgren has been in law enforcement for 34 years, and he's been with the Auburn Police Department for 27 years. He was promoted to lieutenant in August of 16. During the tenure of retired Chief Slucas, then Lieutenant Lundgren served as acting chief on several occasions and often for extended periods. During the past several months since I've appointed him as Provisional Police Chief, I've had the pleasure and the opportunity to work closely with Provisional Chief Lundgren. During this period, he's demonstrated his strong management skills, his vision for the department, his handling of personnel matters, policy decisions, and an extensive knowledge and training in all areas of law enforcement. In a few short months as a provisional leader of the police department, he's instituted best practices in the area of staff development, citizen engagement, uniform protocols, and organizational structure, so that the Auburn Police Department is well-positioned for the many challenges and opportunities facing law department and law enforcement agencies in both the short term and the long term. He's prioritized the focus of the department over the next few months as well, to include organizational structure and staff development, school safety and school resource officer, reestablishing the K-9 program, which we're going to talk about in a short time, and as always, the safety of the community and personnel first. A summary of his education and experience is in this, so I won't read that, but I just want to make sure that the public has that. Just a couple of quick comments. Provisional Chief Lundgren's been a member of the Central Mass Law Enforcement Council SWAT team, and he was part of its early stages. He taught defensive tactics and use of force and firearms. He went on to become a team leader for Semlac Motorcycle Unit, and there's a lot of other things in here that he's accomplished that I just wanted to raise. On a personal note, Provisional Chief Lundgren is married with 2 children. His son Corey is a firefighter paramedic for the town of Holden, and his daughter Carly is an ICU trauma nurse at Mount Auburn Hospital in Cambridge. His wife Marlene works here in Auburn. She's a senior buyer at Carl Stores. During the transition, as well as over the past 11 years since I became town manager, Provisional Chief Lundgren has always been professional, extremely responsive, diligent, and enthusiastic. He's a team player and a strong leader. His qualifications, experience, and training both meet and exceed the qualifications for the position. Based on his background and experience, as well as the recent assessment center and civil service certification, I'm confident that Provisional Chief Lundgren will be an excellent police chief for the town of Auburn and an inspired leader for the police department. In addition, he's an excellent addition to the town administration's executive management team. Therefore, I respectfully request confirmation of the appointment of Todd R. Lundgren to the position of Chief of Police. And also in your, on your desk, it wasn't in your initial packet, I received an email today that I don't know as chair if you'd like to read this email. It came from Paul Johnson on behalf of the entire staff of the Worcester District Court related to Todd Lundgren.
Absolutely. Good morning, Julie. I was speaking with Todd yesterday, and if appropriate, we at the District Court, who have known him for many years, would like to share some thoughts. Clerk Magistrate Brian DeAndrea and the entire office are thrilled for Todd and his family. We at the District Court like to think we helped play a part in the development of a person you will swear in tomorrow as the next chief of the Auburn Police Department. When Todd became a liaison officer to the court, he soon realized that being a successful police officer involved more than making arrests. He recognized compassion and understanding were necessary components to any law enforcement agency. During traffic appeal hearings, it was common for him to say to a parent of a teenager who had been stopped for speeding, "Yes, I get it. I have one like that. I have one at home just like him." It helped relieve much of the anxiety and provide a better understanding for those involved. He genuinely cared about people, especially teenagers. He reminded those involved in case of shoplifting that having a criminal record would be detrimental to their future, and particularly in education and employment opportunities. He wanted to see them beyond the event of trying to see the big picture. It was about educating, not punishment. Judges and lawyers alike view him as forthright and responsible. There was never a question regarding his truthfulness or professionalism. His reputation is beyond reproach. He is blessed with a wonderful sense of humor and not afraid to poke fun at himself. These are vital skills for any manager, but essential for a chief of police. I would agree with that. Todd's time at the Worcester District Court allowed him the opportunity to cultivate friendships with a diverse group of folks not associated with law enforcement. It made him a better person. He is a consummate professional and will serve the community of Auburn with distinction. We are blessed to call him our friend. Thanks, Paul Johnson, on behalf of the Worcester District Court.
So thank you. So I am respectfully asking the board for the town charter for a vote of confirmation to confirm the appointment.
Yes.
This is not like a contract, like an annual basis, right? This is as long as he wants to continue?
Through the chair, yes, the appointment is made once, and then the town manager enters into an employment contract with the chief of police, and in this case, it will be a 5-year contract, which is what I've done with the other chiefs,
Okay,
prior chief.
okay, thank you.
Do we have any comments from the board before we take motions and vote? No? I just want to, I kind of alluded to it before as a young man, but hearing that, I got to experience that firsthand. People who've been in Auburn a long time know that I was a punk in my younger days. I was an absolute punk. Parties in the woods, fights, you name it. But it was Officer Lemon at the time, and Officer Ross as well. I remember getting in trouble one night, me and my mother back at the police station, and I was yelling at these poor guys, and why do you pick on me? And both Lemon and Ross said, because we want to see you become a successful young man. So I saw that they cared even then. And I ended up graduating, and I ended up getting the police scholarship when I was a senior. And here I am today. So I got to experience that firsthand. Pretty cool story for me. I have another story which I want to tell them, which helped me get into law, but I'm not going to tell it in open meeting. All right, and with that, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to confirm the appointment of Todd Lemon as Chief of Police.
And
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is a vote. Congratulations. Yes. Would you like to say a few words?
Go to the, no, here, come on up here. Wherever you can hear it, right?
Yeah.
So I haven't been this anxious or amped up probably in this room probably for about 27 years ago, when I was hoping that the board that I stood before in this very same room was going to appoint my lateral transfer. I'd heard so many good things about the town of Auburn, and although I worked in a nice community, Auburn had a distinct reputation for an unbelievable police department with the best technology, with computers in the cars, and the technology has since plateaued, but I'm excited to be here. I love this community. I love this town. I feel very fulfilled as a police officer, knowing that I have the support of all my department heads, my co-workers. My relationship with Julie and Ed has been unbelievable. The police department, we definitely feel the support of the board and the town leadership. I can honestly tell you that I think that we have the best public safety, police, fire, EMS, second to none, hands down, in New England and maybe beyond. And that didn't happen by accident. That happened because there was vision. I'll mention it tomorrow. Ronnie Miller, who was the chief that hired me, Ron was a detective sergeant from Worcester PD that came over to kind of fix some problems that the police department had before my time. And I was very impressed with Ron. And Ron shook my hand on my first day, and I'll never forget it. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to see him tomorrow at my swearing in. And he said, maybe someday you'll be the next police chief. So fast forward 27 years, here we are today. And I had written something, a couple of things down, and I said, that sounds corny. I know I'm going to forget to thank somebody, but I want the town management to know how much we, as a team, appreciate it, appreciate your support. I feel it, probably one of the best jobs I ever had in the police department, besides the court position. I can't even believe Paul Johnson wrote that. And Paul Johnson, just so everyone knows for your edification, is the first assistant clerk magistrate under Brian DeAndrea, the clerk magistrate. We have a tremendous relationship between our agency and the courts. Probably the other great position that I had was being the firearms licensing officer, because I got to see my job from a whole new perspective where the people were actually glad to see the police, because sometimes they aren't. And I get to meet some great residents in the town of Auburn, and they're all part of my support network. That being said, I had Julie mention my family. My wife stood behind me for a long time, through hard times, through long hours, overnight shifts, going to court after working the overnight, raising 2 kids, being the boss of them when I got home. And both of them made me very proud. They're really what defines me as a human being. This job's very important to me, but it's important for me to tell the board. My 2 kids and my family, my son who's has a new job with the Holden Fire Department as a paramedic and firefighter, and my daughter who's a critical care ICU nurse who literally saves lives. They are what defines me as a human being. And I guess in closing, what I want the residents to know, and I want you to know and be sure of, I don't take the scope of my responsibility lightly. I fully understand what you expect of me. I won't embarrass you. I told that to my boss 27 years ago. We intend on bringing our department to its highest level we can. Provisional Lieutenant Scott Mills, who's here seated at my right, he's been right there with me since February 1st, and he's been working harder than I ever knew a person could. And we're going to move towards becoming certified in an accredited department, and which is something that is a pinnacle for law enforcement. And I guess that's it. That's really it. I mentioned my wife. If I didn't mention her, I'm a dead man. But I really feel supported. I love this community. I wouldn't be here this long. I had actually toyed with the idea of retiring, but I feel re-energized, and I want to thank everybody for all your support. And I'm sorry to see Julie go in January. That was part of what I thought about whether I was going to stay or not. But Eddie, who's unbelievably talented and been completely supportive, and I remember when I took over, both of them said, we don't want to see you fail, because Scott had to take some fast accounting classes. And I guess that's it. Spoken from the heart. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, and with that, I will take a motion to move up agendas items
Now you want.
6A and B. C.
I'll make a motion to move up agenda items 6A, B, and C, or C, A, C, and B. Whatever
Yeah,
order we're
we'll
gonna
go
in.
A, C, B.
Yeah, A, C, B.
And do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. We don't want to keep you guys all night, so we just moved you up. So we're going to go to the police department sting operation report.
Do you want to invite him up?
Yep. Do you want to come up to the table? Yep.
Yeah.
So, let me introduce everyone. This is Detective Sergeant Daniel Lamoureux. And Danny oversees our Bureau of Investigations and the Detective Bureau.
Move Danny up here.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
the microphone system is better up here.
Yep.
Not that I don't have a completely talented police department, but Danny's one of my best and brightest, and he's one of the individuals that actually lets me sleep soundly at night, because the major investigations are under his watch, and he's a very, very bright guy, and consider him a friend and a talented colleague. I know he's going to be a little pissed that I did this tonight, but, so Danny did something a little unusual. We haven't conducted liquor enforcement compliance for quite some time, and we knew it was time, and we actually made history. This was the first time that we've ever worked in conjunction with the ABCC and their agents and their field agents, and we followed their model. And this is the first time we've had 100% compliance with all of our businesses. So, was I a bit concerned that there may be 2 or 3 failures? Prior to my appointment police chief, it could have been a little bit of a contentious evening, but these guys did a great job. I want to commend publicly all of our liquor license holders in town. They passed with flying colors. There wasn't even an inkling that they weren't doing what they were required to do. So you have the reports before you. They passed with 100% compliance.
Excellent. Excellent. Any questions?
I'll just mention that our former chair that was in here a second ago, it seems she already left, has told me in the past that when they've done these, I don't know if one's been conducted since I've been on the board, but you'd always catch a few. So this is really impressive that no one did. So well done, and thank you to the businesses for actually
Thank you.
being in compliance. So thank you both.
And thank you for doing the sting operations to keep them honest.
Thank you. We're going, and just to let the board know, we are going to do them on a fairly regular basis to make sure that our liquor license holders remain in compliance.
Do you have the dates of those? Appreciate the work, thank you.
We are required to publicize that we're doing them, and we do publicize them through the media outlets.
You do, okay.
Yes.
It seems counterintuitive, but if that's what the law says.
Same thing with sobriety compliance checkpoints.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Very good. All right, and now we're going to move on to agenda item 6C. That's the vote to authorize the town manager to accept and expend funds up to, from the Massachusetts Vestadog Incorporated to support the reestablishment of the Police Department K-9 program.
Through the chair, thank you very much. I'd like to invite Lieutenant Scott Mills to discuss this. I know we were before you 2 meetings ago seeking approval to apply for a Stanton Foundation grant, and Lieutenant Mills can explain that we're not eligible for that now, but we haven't, it's not going to stop us. The police department has determined that this is a priority, and I'll turn it over to him.
Through the chair, obviously, good evening. Thanks for having us again. We're here to ask for the permission of the board to apply through Mass Vestadog for them to provide funds to us to purchase a dog. We've identified a dog that we believe fits with the needs of our fledgling restarted program. The cost of that dog is $8,000. Mass Vestadog will pay 70%. The remainder of that, which would be $2,400, that money, our obligation as far as the match end of it, none of that money will come out of any operational funds. It'll come through pre-existing K-9 accounts that were already in place. So no budget funds, nothing like that to get the program going. The reason is what the town, in furtherance of what the town manager said, we were notified by the Stanton grant that our program had only been down for 4 years, not the 5 years that's required for the Stanton grant. So they told us we could reapply or apply next year when we would be eligible. But as you heard, it was one of the chief's priorities to reinstate this program. We thought it was valuable as far as a resource and a service to the town, and it was important for the community to have this and not rely on other departments or other entities. So that's why we're moving forward with it, and we went and identified another grant program to come up with the money. And in addition to that, we've also identified several donors for the building materials and the labor to build the kennel, and a donation for the food and some reduced veterinary care as far as the cost of that care. We don't have values for those donations at this point, but once we do get an actual dollar amount value, we'll come back before the board and ask to accept those, those amounts, depending on what they are, what they end up being when it's all said and done. So we're super excited to get going on it. I think we had said previously the academy or the training program for the handler starts at August 15th. So it's kind of a downhill sprint right now. We hope to have the dog in place or in the States by next month with any luck. And then we'll, like I had spoken to Mr. Chambers outside, maybe we could even bring the dog to a meeting or something, because we're hoping it's going to be very friendly. As of right now, what we can see, it's very friendly. Maybe it wouldn't be appropriate to bring it to a meeting, I don't know. But we're excited about getting the program going again.
Excellent, excellent. Any questions of the board?
Yep, so there were some concerns from some residents about the ongoing costs when the Stanton Foundation grant was being talked about. Do we know what the long-term costs or the annual costs will be going forward? And do we anticipate grants or other funds to support that?
In essence, there's some maintenance, obviously, for the dog as far as regular veterinary checkups and, some of the training that gets done. Most of the training gets done on duty by way of his schedule. We schedule the handler to work essentially a 4-day week, and his 5th day is training. So it'll give him more than what's actually required, about twice what's actually required, which is what we want to keep the program at the level that we expect. So there are really no ongoing costs as far as maintaining the program, as long as we continue to get, the donations of food, which I don't expect that to change, but even it's $500 or so a year probably. And then again, moving, the next cost after that would probably be at least 6 years down the road, to look at replacing the actual dog. They have about a 6 to 8 year window as far as performance. Normally, they usually get them at around a year, a little over a year, and then they work in the field for hopefully 6 to 8 years, and then, and then you start training a second dog to replace that one, so you don't have any gap in service or anything.
Thank you.
Yes.
Through the chair, and I want to inform the other members that when the old canine program, when our dog went to the state gave us a check for the dog, $7,500, which we're still holding in a special revenue account and can be used for maintenance of the new canine or any other costs associated with the dog. So we do have that, in addition to I think that can go towards some of the need of the dog, but certainly there will be other funds to supplement that as well.
Thank you. I am in support of it. Just wanted to make sure that was addressed because it was part of the discussion last time, so thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Lubin?
Yeah, so I just wanted to inform other board members, I had already told the chief about this a while ago, but right after we had originally voted to apply for this grant, for the first time ever, I got, a resident reached out to me to thank us for applying for a grant, which had never happened to me in my 5 years on the board. And we apply for grants at almost every meeting, and no resident had ever reached out before. It was the president of the Fur Friends of Auburn. They were really excited about it and offered to help fundraise for, originally it was for a vest for the dog, but after talking to the chief, it sounded like they were all set on that front, but could use the donations for anything else that would be associated with the dog. So the Fur Friends, I think, are going to move forward with that and fundraise for whatever costs might come up.
And in terms of benefits, I mean, obviously what I spoke to earlier, I mean, I'm sure there's so many applications in which this dog will be beneficial, but even on a traffic stop where you need it, do you not even get one from the state police, or are you waiting,
It's
a good
not
time
that-
frame?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's not that we don't receive the service, it's just there's a downtime generally, and depending on what their availability is and where they are in the area. They're assigned, to the C Troop area, which is our area, but they could be anywhere within our county, so
Yeah.
they may not be readily available. And even the Semlec dogs, it really depends on where that dog is and and whether or not they're available working or tied up or anything. Ideally, we want to be able to provide the service for ourselves, for our community, and to the residents and, to our offices as well. So, it's always better to be self-reliant, and then be part of a larger service group would be ideal.
And lastly, just a fun fact for Auburn. It is Officer Lundgren.
Correct. It's,
Okay.
the
So that's the
handler that
father
was
who did it, and
selected was
now-
David Lundgren, who, his father is James Lundgren, and Jim was a handler for 26 years or thereabouts. And as I mentioned to Mr. Chambers as well, I carried David in a car seat, actually, at one point. So as the chief said, you start to feel a little older, I guess, maybe,
All right, excellent. And do I have a motion?
Motion to authorize the town manager to accept and expend grant funds up to $5,600 from Massachusetts Vesta Dog, Inc., to support the reestablishment of the police department canine program.
And a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 It is a vote.
Thank you so much.
thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Lieutenant.
Thank you.
Good job.
All right, now we're moving on to agenda item 6B, the vote to approve annual weights and measures fees effective July 1, 2022. And I believe we have Caleb Moody here to
Yes,
speak
if
on that.
Caleb can come up and explain this, that would be great. I'm just going to come right behind you.
Hi, thank you. Through the chair, this item, the weights and measures were the fees were last reviewed in 2013. This was identified by the auditor, actually, that we were having some difficulty with past due payments, where the town was actually paying out to the contracted inspector and then waiting months to get payments because we had no vehicle to fine them or late fees. So this is just kind of updating some of the fees, establishing a late fee system that will discourage them from waiting for payment. We did increase some of the fees. We looked at a lot of the area towns, looked at the city of Worcester. We didn't want to be the highest, but we didn't want to be the lowest. And like I said, it's been almost 10 years since they were updated. So anybody has any questions, happy to answer them.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the board?
So they're fees, it's not a deposit or anything?
No, these are fees for weights and measures for gas pumps, price scanners, stuff like that. We're mandated by state law to inspect these items annually. It's done on a random basis, but we're actually going to implement a system where we're getting people to pay ahead of time for their inspection. That way, the bulk of the money will be in place when we have to pay our contracted inspector. Obviously, anything identified at the inspection will have to be billed after the inspection, but we're looking over the next year to work into receiving payment prior to the inspection.
And my assumption is this covers the cost of the contracted people.
Correct. It's on a percentage basis, where the town gets a percentage for the paperwork and the billing, and the inspector gets a percentage for the work he does in the field.
And have their costs gone up significantly since 2013?
What happened in the past is basically the inspector would go out, he'd do his inspection, and hand them the slip. So a lot of times with the larger stores and stuff like that, that slip never made it to the corporate offices, and we weren't getting payment. So what we're doing is we're taking a lot of the billing into the office now. The inspector's just going to go out and do his inspection, then he's going to report back to us his findings, and we'll send the bills. And there has been a little added cost to us based on us taking over some of the billing, and
But this still covers that cost?
yes.
One more question through. Absolutely. Were other fee structures and stuff part of the audit, or are you looking at those and looking to enhance those?
So what happened is the audit identified an account being in the negative because we were making payment out to that contractor before we got the money in. So this is set to hopefully alleviate that problem. They can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's correct, and what made it difficult is because the billing is not done through our Munis module, there's no accounts receivable to track. So a lot of this really reverted back to just old-fashioned legwork, going back, finding out which receivable wasn't paid in full, and the inspector would get his share of that inspection, sometimes prior to getting payment from the vendor. So we ceased that practice. As Caleb indicated, we're gonna get the money up front. We did a reconciliation of the account and got it down to roughly a $3,000 balance. We've identified some receivable as an offset to that, but for the most part, we're back on track again, so.
So now I have another question. Sorry, Bob. So now, is it going to be through municipal account that this will proceed, or does it have to stay separate? So you
I
said,
think you're doing it through People GIS?
No, we're not in People GIS yet. It's going to go through Munis, but a lot of the record keeping is going to be done here rather than kept by the inspector, so we'll have everything in front of us to be able to track everything a lot better than we were in the past.
okay. And then other fees will follow this same improved model, so we're not paying out?
Yeah, the other ones are set up like this already.
Okay.
This is just a kind of anomaly that we're pulling into in-house so we can keep track of it better moving forward.
The online system for permitting and pulling permits and tracking them is phenomenal. It's really easy to use, so.
Yeah.
Is that the Muni that we're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
No, and that's something I've mentioned in the past. I just want to make sure that, again, we're not setting the market, but we're comparable with the towns around us, and that the fees are covering our costs.
Yeah, we don't want to be the highest, but we want to at least cover our costs in-house, so.
Thank you.
Yes, sir?
I think I already know the answer to this, but, so we contract out to the person that's doing the measurements. Would there be any cost saving to training someone to do it in-house? I mean, there's a lot of things that they'd have to be trained in, so I understand that that's not the case. I was wondering if that was something that was ever looked at.
Yeah, it's a pretty big undertaking to get licensed for weights and measures, and I did some research, and a lot of the communities actually contract with the state of Massachusetts for their inspections. I would say that there's only a handful left that are still doing the contractor. I think that's based solely on the availability of someone that's certified to do these inspections, because there's not many left out there.
He's actually an employee of the town and not an outside vendor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just paid as a contractor rather than a salaried employee.
And do we have or does town management want to speak?
I do want to just add that Caleb's done a great job. He's constantly looking at fees. This came up in the orientation the other day. You know, part of what he does and what everyone does in their department is constant review of the fees, just to make sure we're still within the market, we're covering our costs. And again, you know, our job isn't to generate revenues. Our job is to provide the service and cover the cost that it is to provide that service. So that's where the fine line is what are our actual costs and what should we be charging? And sometimes it appears high, and sometimes it appears low, but it's all based on our both direct and indirect costs. So thanks, Caleb.
Thank you. And do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the weights and measures fees effective July 1, 2022.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote. Thank you.
Thanks, Caleb.
Go back in order now, which brings us to item 5B, gift acceptances. We have fire rescue in the amount of $100.
Motion to accept with gratitude.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote. Proclamations and recognitions, I see none. And another hot pressing issue before us. Discussion and potential vote on summer meeting schedule. I had met with Julie and we had discussed the 25th and 22nd of August. Obviously, with the understanding that if there's any matters that do come before us which are urgent, we always have the ability to convene a meeting if need be.
Through the chair, one of the reasons we had talked about that date is because you do have a meeting on June 27th.
Yep.
So we thought if you're going to just meet once in July and once in August, which has been the tradition, is at least as long as I've been here, probably for 20 years, that it would be better to go the end of the month to spread out these meetings. And again, as the
Kinda
chair
keeps them
said,
equal.
keeps them equal. If we need, for any reason, to have a vote, we can get in touch with the board and see if you could set a meeting. But generally, most of our licensing and all those, there shouldn't be anything really time-sensitive in the summer.
Do I have a motion?
I'm actually out of town August 22nd, but you can certainly meet without me.
Does anyone else have any conflicts, or?
Well, I don't know if this is the time to mention it publicly, but as everyone else in the room already knows, and I was planning to say at the end of this meeting anyway, I've accepted a slot at the class for Naval OCS. It'll be in Newport, Rhode Island, starting July 2nd of this year. So next meeting will be my last meeting on the board before I submit a resignation. Again, saying that publicly for the first time. A lot of people already know because I've kind of stopped keeping it a secret. Of course, the first people I let know were, after family and friends, were members of the board and town administration. So I was planning to say at the end of this meeting anyway, so you guys can get the ball rolling on planning the special election. That'll be needed. But that said, I will not be around July 25th or August 22nd, so you may want to make sure that as many board members are available as possible. So if Sarah can't make the August 22nd one, then we may want to pick a different date.
Yeah.
Through the chair, we can double check. If you want to take a vote, maybe the recommendation would be take a vote to tentatively schedule those 2 dates, and then we can check and see if we have confirmation. Those 2 dates are regularly scheduled meetings anyway. They weren't off the chart, but sometimes we can do that, so we can check
We'll
around.
keep this on the agenda to make sure that the August wouldn't be in jeopardy. Then
Yeah,
we'd have
because
a
you're going to
quorum.
meet again in June, so, but if you want to take a vote to potentially have those as the 2 dates pending the ability to get a quorum. And I don't know if this is appropriate to say since you just announced it, but I know it's not on the agenda, but congratulations.
Thank you.
That's so
Yes,
exciting for you.
Thank you.
We're excited to hear that, and we're really sorry to see you go. You know, I can speak, and I'm sure Eddie will say the same thing. It's been a real pleasure to work with you. And when you just said that you had been on the board for 5 years, that just, it was shocking, because it just doesn't seem like 5 years, and that's a good sign, because it means things have gone well. We've really appreciated having you on the board.
Well, thank you, I
You've been good
appreciate
to
that.
work with, and we'll miss you. And I don't know if Eddie, you want to say?
Oh, and I would like to say the same. I know you're going to succeed in your new opportunity, so like Julie said, we're gonna miss you, and we want to wish you the best, and it's been a pleasure working with you over the past, I can't believe it's been 5 years even, so.
Thank you. Well, thank you both. And yeah, since we already had a goodbye thing for me the last time that I was leaving the board, we don't have to do what we did for Lionel at the last meeting. So, yeah, I think that'll do it. But I appreciate you both, and it's been great working with you.
Well, I'm the chair now, and I get to decide what we're going to do with that next meeting. All right, so do I have a motion for a tentative schedule for the summer?
So moved.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is a vote. Okay, moving on to agenda item 5E, the annual vote to reaffirm the code of conduct. Per the town charter, we are to reaffirm this code of conduct each year.
So through the chair, if I can just give you some background. So I think the first time, might have been 2017 or 2018, the Board of Selectmen put together a subcommittee to develop a code of conduct. I would say the majority of select boards across the Commonwealth have a code of conduct, and it basically just reaffirms the conditions and the responsibilities of the board under the town charter. It just makes it clear. So that was, when they developed that policy, they specifically stated in it that every year it would be reaffirmed after the election, assuming there may be new members. So that's the reason that they had done it, from a history perspective.
Do we have any questions, concerns from the board?
Make a motion to reaffirm the code of conduct policy.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is a vote. Okay. And moving on to 5F, we have some committee reappointments. First, we have the Finance Committee. Ann Kavanaugh and Michael Marshall have expressed a desire to be reappointed. These are reappointees, so generally we wouldn't hold interviews in this case since they're being appointed to a position they already hold. Do I have any questions, comments? Okay. In that case, I'll take a motion.
Make a motion to reappoint members Ann Kavanaugh and Michael Marshall to the Finance Committee for a term expiring June 30th, 2025.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote. All right, and we have the zoning board of appeals, zoning board of appeals, excuse me. We have Caitlin Bush and Lawrence Chicola? Okay. Again, to be reappointed, so we need a motion to reappoint them for terms ending June 30th, 2025.
Make a motion to reappoint Caitlin Bush and Lawrence Chicolo to the ZBA for terms expiring June 30th of 2025.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote. And lastly, we have Board of Registrars. Michael McNamara would like to be reappointed, and again, for a term expiring June 30th, 2025.
Make a motion to appoint Michael McNamara, or reappoint Michael McNamara to the Board of Registrars for a term expiring June 30th of 2025.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote.
Excuse me. Do we know how many vacancies are on these boards, and what are we looking at for refilling if there are any vacancies?
I can get that information for you. It seems to change on a daily basis
Okay, thank you.
occasionally, but we do advertise for vacant seats. I believe we have a full complement on
We have a
Finance
full
Committee.
board on the Finance Committee. The zoning board, I don't know if there is an associate vacancy
I'll
or
double
not.
check, yeah, I'm not sure. I think there may be one associate seat.
Yeah, I think one of these
advertised.
people became a regular member. And the Board of Registrars, the board nominates it as a three-member board, and they nominate their own members, so.
And all of the vacant board, committee, and commission seats are posted on our website. So these are the ones that the Board of Selectmen appoint. All the other ones are town manager appointments, so they're all advertised. And we do a lot of heavy advertising on our boards, and we get it out to the school department also, and they send it out to about 4,500 people. And that's been a great source of getting people to sign up for committees. And just a different demographic than we get, you know, on the website. You get young families sometimes, so it's nice. We've been able to bring in some new people in town to get involved. So we do have a number of board, committee, and commission seats, not necessarily what's before you now, but in general, we always do. There's always turnover. People move out of town, they get a new job, they can't make the meeting nights anymore, so we always have openings. So we just encourage people to constantly give us applications, even if they apply for one particular board or commission, and if there's no vacancy, we may call and ask them to be on another one.
Well, I appreciate those throwing their names back in the ring, and I think if they're willing to do it, we should always be willing to accept that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you.
Before we move on, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to ask about, because we also had, and this isn't a standing committee, this was the committee that we created for the, I forget what we named it, but it was to honor individuals who had contributed to the town. We tasked them with coming up with a name for the new sunroom. I was wondering if we
Yes.
had any, I know we had the one applicant because they attached me to an email, so now we have the library member and the select board member. I was wondering if we had any other residents come forward, or is it just the one?
Not that I'm aware of. I am setting up a couple of phone interviews, because I always interview people for the regulatory boards and commissions, similar to what you do for FinCom and ZBA. So I think I have one extra applicant that is not, you know, we have more applicants than seats for a change on that one. So I always ask if they're willing to serve on other committees, so at that point we can check. Rachel in my office, she's going through them all too. There's a box to check if you're willing to serve on another committee if the one that you've asked for is full. So we can check, but nobody specifically, as of the other day anyway, had applied.
Thank you.
Okay. And item G, 5G, we have discussion on zoning bylaw 7.5, signs which do not require a sign permit and proposed amendments. I believe this was put forward by my able vice chair, so I will hand that over to you.
Sure. So, members except for Steve will remember that I brought this forward a few months ago when I had, actually I've been meaning to bring it up for a while, ever since I saw the case when it was Holyoke. The city of Holyoke was sued for having restrictions and actually enforcing them on some signs that people had in their yards for I think they were fined for keeping the signs, political signs out so many days before an election, and my immediate thought was, hey, we have that same bylaw. And I just think that these bylaws in general cause a lot of confusion, not so for local elections, but when you're running a campaign or volunteering on a campaign that's across the district or in any district, the county, if you're running for Register of Probate, District Attorney, or whatever, you're looking at when these signs can go up in which towns, at what times. So I think it caused a lot of confusion for them if their signs can go up 30 days before the election in Auburn, 45 days in Middlebury, whenever you want in Oxford. It makes it a little bit more difficult for them. On top of that, there's the question of primaries. 30 days before an election, then you technically would have to go back and get them because now it's more than 30 days before the general election. But of course, no one does that, so it's a bylaw that's not actually enforced completely. So I think it's just messy in general, and that's kind of my opinion of it. So I thought it might just be easier to just strike it from the bylaws and take out anything that was similar to it. So I went through 7.5, which is signs which do not require a sign permit, and struck anything that kind of seemed like it would be in that category. At the same time, I also don't think, we really should tell people what they can and can't put in their yards. The purpose of the bylaw, at least for political signs, was you didn't want candidates going out there and putting signs in their yard, but in theory, if a resident wants to put out a sign of their own that says that they're supporting someone, we can't tell them that they can't put that out there. So it's, I think it's too hard to enforce. It's more of just a guideline that we hope people follow anyway. Continue to advise candidates not to do it potentially, but at the same time, I really don't think that it's necessary. And I think it just is something easy that can be taken out. So with that, I would love to just pass this along to the planning board and ZBA and have them hold a hearing on it. I don't think it's too controversial, and then send it off to town meeting, but whatever members' thoughts are, of course.
So this would be a vote to recommend moving this on to the planning board.
Right. I think that's the procedure for anything, any zoning or any bylaw changes, right?
And the
Yeah.
zoning bylaw review committee doesn't have authority to change it, but we've been sending things to them as well for recommendation.
So I think what we're seeing, it strike all restrictions. So theoretically, 5 years from now, I wanted to run for office. I could put a sign in my yard now and leave it
And
up.
then leave it.
Is that what you're planning on?
No, I am not. I am, and I think the 30 days is very restrictive, and I think especially when you get into primaries and such, that is an issue. But I also don't want to see the town cluttered with signs year-round. And I'm always wary of the unintended consequence. So I would be in favor of something that had a date in there or a timeline, and I guess if it's going before the other boards, I'd leave it to them to decide what that would be. But, yeah, I think there needs to be a date in there or something that could potentially be enforceable.
So my hesitancy with putting any kind of date on is, one, it doesn't address the problem that Holyoke had, because you're still at some point potentially going to have to enforce, hey, you can't have that sign in your yard. And if you want to put a sign out in your yard, you can put a sign that says that you had someone seal coat your driveway whenever you want. Political sign, I think, is fine. There are political signs that don't support a candidate in particular that people have in their yards all the time that we see. The Back the Blue, Black Lives Matter signs that don't fall under this bylaw that people can put up year-round. And then also putting any kind of restriction on it wouldn't solve the problem that campaigns have where one town has a restriction of one date and one town has a restriction of another date. So I just think striking it in general is the easiest course. But
Is there a mass law on the books that people can, obviously we're more restrictive of that, but is there something on the state level where they're restricting it?
not that I know of, and I've never come across anything using it.
And to me, I'm thinking political signs as those for an active campaign, not necessarily an active cause. I don't know. In my head, I think of an individual running for office.
That's one of the questions I had when looking at all this, is if it's what is political and where does that line start and stop? But for me, also the biggest thing, and I'm not asking the town manager this question, I don't want to know the answer to it, but I'm making an assumption that it's not enforced at all. So why, to Tristan's point, why do we have it on the books? If there's no enforcement, it just creates confusion for candidates across the board, especially in those larger elections.
So I just looked at this again, and I just saw that political signs are allowed on private property. Political signs aren't really defined. So yeah, to your point, is a political sign a sign for a candidate, or a sign for a party, a sign for, yeah, what can be a political sign? I don't know. To me, it's just really messy. And of course, we're keeping the restriction, I'm sorry, Sarah, of not on public property, which I wouldn't encourage. I think that used to be a thing, that signs were allowed on public property until that was stopped. I would agree to keep that ban, not so the signs aren't cluttering town-owned land, but if someone wants to put it out in their yard.
I don't disagree with you, Steve. I think having an end date on it would be great, but I also, if you drive through Oxford, there's not a ton of just random campaign signs still out. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know that it's really an issue. People tend to take them down shortly after anyways. But I get the, like, I would hate to see something up for more than a year that you're like, come on. But I don't know that is an issue. Like,
It's not until it is. That's all I'm saying.
I don't disagree.
Through the chair, I believe, this goes back several years, but I believe at the time that this went to town meeting, there was a sign bylaw that went twice. The first time it failed, and the second time it went through. And I believe a lot of the discussion back then, and we're probably talking at least 9 years ago, was sign clutter. And I do know we did have some complaints, and when you get a complaint, that you do have to enforce it. So if we get a complaint that someone's sign is up too long, our building commissioner has to go out and enforce it, and has to ask them to move it. It happens more than you think. It tends to happen shortly after an election, where, someone will call and say, well, the election's over, why isn't the sign being removed? But I can't tell you, because I just don't remember that far back, and I had just been here a couple of years when this whole conversation started, but sign clutter was a concern. It could be different now, but that's what it was back then. And since this has gone into place, maybe it's less of an issue, so maybe there'd be more of an appetite to change it. I'm not sure. Again, I think maybe the best thing would be to send it to the bylaw review committee and the planning board, and have them have hearings on it, because people could have some of the concerns that you've had, or some of the concerns that you've had, and it may, things change a lot in 9 years. Just because something happened 9 years ago doesn't mean it's going to be the same thing now.
I do think it's restrictive, or too restrictive now, but I worry about not having any enforceable mechanism.
I wonder, though, if we can't just call it like political campaign signs and put an end date on that, because then it's not running up against what happened in Holyoke, because it was a more political statement sign. I don't know if maybe that's the solution, and change the dates a little there.
Political campaign as in individuals running for office.
Yes, that would be my.
I think there has to be something on it, because someone could define campaign differently. There are signs on some houses that I'm not fans of now, but
Could do that. Could change it, or even adding a definition, or changing candidate signs, specific campaign, town election campaigns, changing it to town.
so town doesn't help
Goes
when
against
you're
the
running
intent.
the state.
Yeah.
Because that's
You're
really
right.
the biggest gap for me, and I will say, being newly elected, getting name recognition is difficult if you're not an incumbent. So if I were to try and get my name out there, would I start 6 months before an election to do that? Again, I don't know if everyone in the town's favorable towards something like that. I mean, if my name was on it, I'd be like, this is great. Other people could say this is junk or litter. So just wary of it. I'm all for sending this to the proper boards and have them debate the merits a little bit more, or put some guidelines around it, but I would hate to just leave it open-ended.
I'm going over in my mind trying
Yeah.
to solve
How that sausage gets made, because it's never gonna look exactly as you'd put it
Right.
after it goes through those committees and town meeting anyway. So, would you be opposed to putting, I guess we're really scrapping the entirety of it, so it would just be in its place putting in an end date to political election campaign signs? If I'm understanding your
Again, if
concerns.
you're drawing papers for office, when those papers are due, that would be a good date to allow signage on the return date of having your papers verified. And then till, if you want to say 7 days after the election, that reduces the clutter and allows people to go get their signs, because not everyone remembers all the locations. But that also covers the primary all the way to the general in there too, or you could specify that gap is no longer valid. So you can say from the primary in a state election.
if we differentiate between. I don't know. I'm open to changing it now and sending that along as well.
Yeah, I
Just
think if we
coming
tie
up with
it,
the wording now.
tie it to when you're pulling papers, or or the last date to rescind, right? Or I don't know what, because
Just have to
there's
be
a gap
longer.
in there still.
To rescind after you've pulled the papers.
So you can pull, and then you have that gap after everything's been verified to withdraw. I don't know what that gap is compared to the actual election, but they are printing out ballots at that point.
Say it's the date of submission, the
Okay, I'm
Final
okay
day.
with that too.
you know,
I'm okay with any of it if that's what the people want. I do think you have to have something, some sort of guidelines, because we will end up, maybe not this year, but in other contentious years, with people putting 400 signs in their lawn and saying you can't do anything.
Yep.
Which, if I'm trying to sell my house, I'm not gonna be happy living
Yeah.
next to that person.
yeah, that's fair.
The other thing I wanted to mention for this one was flags that go along with political flags that are flown, and they're not signs, but can go up whenever and stay up whenever. So I'm thinking political signs for local office are allowed on private property.
Maybe state or town? State, town, or county? It's the lawyer in me, sorry.
What about federal, if
Federal.
residential?
Well, that's what I'm thinking, so but those signs, those are definitely not enforced. I mean, the signs that I've seen up for presidential elections, those go up way before, 30 days before primary, and they stay up through the general.
And I think that goes to the confusion of when they can put them up, so.
Right, so I'd almost,
Those campaigns are run at a higher level, they're not necessarily aware of 45, 30, whatever, the zero knocks, or.
right, so I was trying to write those guys off entirely and just say local. Because those are the ones that if you're gonna, the concern is clutter, I would imagine it would be local offices. I mean, looking at moderator, school committee, and selectmen, that would have signs all over the town, and clustered. So I think if the idea is that we're trying to avoid any kind of clutter of signs, then those would be that would be the specific one that we'd want to target, and then I really think we can write off everyone else. But I don't know. It's a political sign.
I'm not for making it different for each level either. Because if you're gonna make it different, then that's even harder to follow.
I'd argue that it already is. Just with,
Is it, or is, because maybe the enforcement is different, and again, I don't wanna get into that piece, but right now, it doesn't say it's different, right? They're all,
well, right now it doesn't say that there's a difference between any kind of political signs. So anyone with, and there's no definition for political sign either, so.
And at what point is it speech that we don't want?
Exactly, yes.
We don't have the right to restrict.
Yeah, at what point do you get into the Holyoke situation?
Yeah.
Again, this is why I struck the whole thing.
Candidate for office is,
Yeah. Candidate for local office.
We have to be candidate for
that
local.
way it's a named person and not a cause,
Yeah.
for lack of a better word.
Oh, because sometimes you have signs though, so if you do candidate for local office, if you have a Prop 2.5 override, questions go out, yard signs go yes, no.
But you know what, but you don't know until that's published what it is, right? So then it comes back down to when the override is written or whatever, right? So it's gotta get filed, so whenever that date is. And I'm not opposed to leaving those other things
Up to the planning.
for the 30 days, if you wanna say that, or.
Yeah.
We could have two options here, is we could look at a subcommittee for this, to review it, or we could table it as well if you wanted to try and rewrite to maybe specific, get more specific with it for the next meeting, or we can bring it forward now, I guess, so we do have three options before us.
I don't think so, I'm sorry.
Actually have one more question. What was Holyoke's solution? Like, they mandated by court to stop doing that. They must have changed the bylaw? Did they strike the whole bylaw?
The
Like,
court struck their
so
bylaw.
did they come
I don't know if
back
they-
with something else?
Yeah, I don't know if they actually changed anything or made something else. I
Gotcha.
know that their bylaw was just struck down. I think this is too small for a subcommittee. That's my thought on it. I'd rather move forward with it. And tabling it, I think, just to find some kind of wording for it. I kind of agree. If we can send it forward to planning with those comments and say, if you guys are thinking anything like this, to change it. You want to come up with better language, sure, but here are the problems that we see with it. So I think that'd be what I'd prefer to do tonight.
Sure.
Do I have a motion?
All right.
I will make a motion to send this revision to the planning board. Is that what we need?
In the zoning bylaw.
And the zoning bylaw board.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. It is a vote.
Sure you want to leave? I think you want to debate.
I actually really like that. Sorry I only get 3 meetings with you.
Okay, and we've already gone through the town manager items. We have no table items, so moving on to select board member items. We have discussion on designating a historic district or similar bylaw, and that again was brought forward by Mr. Liberty, the vice chair.
Yeah, big surprise. I got some things for everyone before I leave. Okay, so I just want to take everyone's temperature on these 3 things because now that it's already out there, I'm not going to be here to see all of them through, so I wanted to know which I should prioritize getting to you guys before departing and take your temperature on them. So I've been playing with the idea of submitting some kind of bylaw to either protect historic buildings in town or designate a historic district. One of the reasons for this is there's been a lot of chatter on the town pages about preserving historic buildings, and I thought that the town could use something for the planning board to fall back on when there is an older building in town that is in danger, and that there is a benefit to the community in keeping it. So designating a historic district, I actually had originally planned to put that, there's a sheet from the state, it's about 200 pages, that it's on PDF, you can all look it up if you want, I wouldn't recommend it. But it's a really long process, creating another committee to go through. I decided not to put it in the packet because I didn't think that was the direction we wanted to go in. Auburn, as you know, was settled at different times in different areas, so we really don't have one specific part of town that's particularly old that would be preserved or benefit from this. So I was leaning away from doing a historic district and instead thinking of a kind of bylaw. But again, I wanted to take everyone's temperature, see what their thoughts were on if I came forward with the bylaw for our next meeting. If you would take it, run with it, either run with it for the next couple of meetings, make some edits to it, and then send it off to planning, or how you might all respond to that. So with that, everyone's thoughts.
So, if not a historic district, and that's a great point, we have spots.
Right.
So it could lead to people feeling like they were being picked on, or,
Yeah.
pointed out in a fashion where historic districts can come along with a lot of restrictions on what one can do with their house, not just protection of that house per se as well. So what would the bylaw entail if we're not going in that direction? Just
So from the limited research I did with Brookline, some of their bylaws, and it was hard to parcel out what was part of their historical district and what was just protection of historic buildings. But from what I could figure, they have a route for the planning board to take to say, okay, this building has value to the community because it was established at this time. There are minor restrictions put in place on what can be done to it. But they're not as extensive as what would be for a historic district. Pretty much everything that you want to do to a house in that district would have to get approval from a special board. Instead, it's more major renovations. So I think it's less restrictive in that sense, but it would also give the planning board a little bit more of an avenue to protect buildings.
so she'll not be raised and more like front facade
Yeah.
type restrictions?
Yeah.
Okay.
So really, I was looking to come in with Brookline's edited, redrafted, see if I could find any other communities that have something similar to that, and just send that off to planning to see what their thoughts were.
Would this have to go before town meeting?
Yes.
So, again, being separate, like how do we identify that, and do we wait before something comes to planning, and how does that look for the market for someone trying to sell something, or again, being picked on? If it's not already on the historical register, is there gonna be a mad push to get people to put things on there, and who can do that? As a homeowner, can I put my house on there, or can someone else put it on there? I mean, my house is 200 years old.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you
But
have
it
one
was
of them.
renovated sometime in the 70s, so it doesn't necessarily look 200 years old. So as a homeowner, I don't necessarily want anyone telling me what I can and can't do, but I understand and I respect history. But I don't know what that line is, and I do think there is some historic preservation that should be discussed, but I don't own those properties, so if it goes to town meeting and they want to discuss how to handle that, I'm on board with that. But I'm thinking the easiest thing might be if something comes up for sale like that, the town can do some sort of right of first refusal and say this is integral to the community, and then we can go to town meeting and say, do we vote to purchase this historical thing? Or do we identify those and say if they ever come up, we talk about
Rights of first refusal generally come from the state level in terms of like 61A land and B and the like. I don't know if we'd just be able to, through bylaw, give ourselves the right of first refusal.
You'd still need approval of town meeting
Okay.
to purchase the property, and you still have to follow, if you do a purchase, you still have to follow Chapter 30B procurement.
Okay.
So you still have to look to see if it's an exclusive use, or otherwise you have to go out to bid.
Then we'd end with the town also owning, even if all of that went through, then the
But,
town
so
owns.
that's my thing, is if it's truly historical and benefits the town, then that shouldn't be an issue. Whereas, as a private owner of a house, I don't want necessarily you to tell me I can't do something. But if I wanted to say, look, I'm gonna sell this land, or I'm gonna tear it down, then there's the ability for the town to say, no, this is integral to us as a community, and at whatever the process is, and we can, again, as a community, vote on that. I just don't know how many historically significant homes would make that list.
And how far-reaching it would be, because it would be spot. It just would be based
I
on the
would-
makeup of our
I
town.
would be concerned with that if like there were renovations that we were now, the town was stuck like fixing things that were no longer up to code or no, where you'd be in a weird situation where the town owns a building that can't really be used.
In my experience as an attorney, they vary wildly from town to town. I mean, even as much if you don't have the right style of window, it may be a perfectly good window that you spent a lot of money on, but if it doesn't have enough of the grading, you know what I mean, in between, it's a no-go. And if you didn't ask the right people, they'll make you change out every single one of those windows. So it can become cumbersome at some points, for sure.
Yeah, I don't want the town to own anything, but no, I respect the history. If I was independently wealthy, I would try to preserve as many as I could. But if the community sees fit that they want to protect something, I like that ability or some mechanism in there without being far-reaching.
I also feel like you get in a weird situation where the people of the community want something, and then you're forcing the town's hand, just as like budget-wise, or,
What do you mean with that?
I mean, like if it went to town meeting and they said, yeah, we want to buy this, and it went out to bid for a lot of money, then you're kind of stuck with, this is what town meeting members said, and maybe it was not really in the budget to purchase that parcel, or, exactly.
It wasn't in the budget.
So that would be my concern, is like, you're tying a lot of hands to like, to push that. I'm not against the historic district or buildings or anything like that. I think sometimes people get passionate about things, and it puts it in a tough situation for the town.
So to clarify, if we adopted a bylaw, even a historic district or something to protect, the planning board would be able to protect those houses from, say, a developer that was coming in. It wouldn't require the town to buy the property to protect it. It would just put the restrictions on the developer, not allowing them
Gotcha.
to demolish. It was Steve that came in that was saying, we're going to buy the property.
Homeowner, and this is where you can't treat them different than a homeowner.
Yeah.
And if I owned a property and wanted to subdivide and raise a building,
Right.
how you can't treat me differently than that, and that's the crux of the matter. So, although I am a big fan of it, I don't see the town getting involved in those restrictions without being sued consistently.
I, for one, would be in support of it, but how that would look, I think,
Yeah, there's a lot of
we're very
questions.
far off from that point. And I would not want to go very far beyond facade and restrictions on raising and subdividing the land. I think that'd be as far as I'd be willing to go. Because again, you can get really complicated with these pretty quickly.
My house is 200 years old and has vinyl siding and vinyl windows, so.
How do we undo that?
Well, no, and that's the thing is, if there's a restriction to undo it, and the next time I wanted to plant a garden, I was forced to change my windows out,
Yep.
yeah, I'd be on that side yelling
Yes.
constantly, with probably a few lawyers, because I'm
Yes.
sure they'd take that up. So, I'm wary of the restrictions.
With that, I mean, I'll just take a look and see if I can find anything that meets those concerns. I don't know, but I'll see. At 2 weeks.
You want to table this one?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to table, Adam, to our next meeting.
Is there anything else I can throw at you?
Yeah, let me know now, because I've got 2 weeks to write it. I've got nothing else going on.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. So this is another one I wanted to take everyone's temperature on. So, looking at Amherst. Yeah, keep drinking. No. Amherst bylaws have restrictions. This is also where I got the plastic bag ban from several years ago. That limit single-use plastics. mostly with packaging for restaurants. And instead they've switched over to biodegradable or compostable packaging. So it's already been done in at least Amherst and maybe other communities. So I wanted to extend the bylaw amendment that we passed several years ago that just went into effect this past year to include packaging for food at restaurants. We have a lot of restaurants in town, so I think that would actually have a significant impact. In terms of cost to the owners, it would probably be a slight one because I'm guessing that it costs a little bit more than styrofoam, but it's not something that's going to break the bank. It's already been adopted in other communities, so I really don't think it would be that much of a burden. I think the burden would really be on the town to learn how to identify those packaging or that packaging and inform those businesses. So we're looking at another, maybe it takes a couple of weeks to write the bylaw, a couple of months to learn, or a year to learn about the bylaw, then another year rollout to inform businesses about the bylaw. So we're looking at, a long process for the town, but a quick process to write the bylaw. But again, before we even got to the point where we were asking the Board of Health and our department heads to look into this, wanted to take the board's temperature before coming to the board with a draft.
This one I do support, and knowing that it was on our agenda, I was more cognizant of it. So peppercorns in Worcester, I noticed right away, we had some Grubhub the other day, it had the biodegradable, you could easily tell. And I'm thinking to myself, this is probably cheaper than the plastic that a lot of other companies use that seal and whatnot, so I don't even think it would be a cost, prohibitive action for a lot of the companies locally, and it's in line with our paper bags. So I'm sure there's other purposes other than just food delivery that I'm, but in my mind, that's what stuck out. So this one, as far as I'm concerned, unless there's certain applications to where it's very cost prohibitive for certain companies, which I'd certainly listen to, I see no harm in trying to move this one forward.
Do you guys know anything about supply chain issues?
A little bit.
You know how difficult it is to get things that are in demand and what that's going to do? It's not, there may be cost implications, but again, most of these companies are going from suppliers that aren't in town. Now they're going to have to call out what they're looking for. They're going to have to spend resources on finding that material. And hopefully it gets delivered, but then you run low, you can't get it, what do you do? So if you're going to have a bylaw that's going to enforce something that you really can't enforce, that becomes a problem as well.
On the assumption that biodegradable packaging is hard to get.
Yeah, hi. Business owner, we try to get recyclable material, and it is difficult. You guys may have heard about recycling being an issue and China not accepting a lot of our materials, and a lot of the stuff that gets used in manufacturing meets certain percentages. So I think it's more than just, I think most business owners want to do what's cost conscious, what's right for their clients and right for the community. If you're putting a soup in a biodegradable container, how long can that temperature work? And now it's plastic coated, and then it doesn't meet those biodegradable standards. So there is going to be a lot of back and forth on that.
So with regard to time to roll out and supply chain issues, we look at what we did with the bag ban. It was a rollout of 3 years because we got delayed with COVID and everything. And we had, we gave 6 months for something like this. We could give even longer for businesses to whittle down on their existing stock, continue to use whatever they are able to get their hands on, but they have so long to find out how to purchase something that would be compliant. And the town did a great job. I'll call her out, Darlene Boyle specifically did a great job with connecting with businesses over that time and actually helping them find places that would supply them with bags that were compliant. And with regard to the China trash problem with recycling, that was one of the big reasons to even go forward with the bag ban in general. It cut down on solid waste, or at least that was one of the goals of it. When New York City had implemented their bag ban, the whole goal was to cut down on solid waste, have people bring their own bags, so now you have less going into the garbage and less that's being thrown out. So ideally, in this situation, same thing, yeah.
I think you're gonna be looking at a lot of takeout, and I think the nature of the world we're in is more people are doing takeout.
That increases the impact.
Yeah, which then makes the demand for that material that much more difficult. I will also say, I don't know if you do the shopping for your household, but I forget my bags all the time. I curse you whenever I go shopping. And I carry out
5 years
items, I
living in
drop
Amherst.
things all the time. Well, as I hear from many people, we're not Worcester, so I'm gonna say we're not Amherst. I do commend what you're trying to do, I just don't support it, and I think there are, again, unintended consequences. And then the costs, if there are cost increase, are going to get put back onto those people that are trying to purchase. The owners aren't necessarily gonna eat the cost for very long if there's a cost increase. In this time, I'm not, you might have the votes to do it, I'm just stating my piece.
Appreciate it.
I am for anything that is environmentally friendly. I just think the cost to businesses might be a lot right now.
I think I would agree right now, and that's why I'm saying, you know, I don't want to pass this and have it go for that reason, and to not crush Darlene and make her think poorly of me as I'm leaving. Wouldn't want to put something that immediate before her. This is something that I think if we go forward with, we'd have to attach a stipulation. This isn't going to go into effect for several years. This is give her the time that she needs to learn about it, edit it, and
Work the supply chain. Again, if it's available and it's cost effective, but most of these businesses will look to implement that on their own. They do. I promise you.
sometimes they need a little push
Some-
because
Yeah.
what's
And so
cost
it
effective
could
isn't
be-
always
It could be
environmentally
the
friendly.
discussion, and again, I think the biggest impact would be on the suppliers and where you're getting that. And again, they're gonna tell you the concerns that I said with the supply chain and be able to get those materials on the end user or on the business, local business side. They're gonna find packaging that defines their business, is cost effective, or, again, no one wants to have a sloppy container or something that's gonna break or take away from the quality of what they're serving. All right, I will stop beating this. But, now I'm really sad that you're gonna leave.
Honestly, yeah, me too. All right, the last, I'm sorry.
So, do we want to, what would you be looking to do here? To have a bylaw start moving forward to be worked on, or?
Yeah, I'll write it. I don't want to put that on Darlene. We can table this too, and I'll come forward at the next meeting, and we can talk about a timeline from there. We can, if it's through the town, through you to the town manager, we can ask Darlene to come in and ask what would work best for her, because again, I don't want to. I already have Adam that hates me. I don't want her to also. So,
Well, I definitely think, through the chair, I definitely think it's a consideration, I'm glad you said that, just for the staff time to go into these bylaws. You know, we have one town planner, we have two people on Board of Health, but Board of Health's pretty backed up right now. There's a lot of things on their plate, kind of critical, we're still dealing with COVID. There's just a lot of projects going on, so I don't want to, we would have to look at a resource, an allocation of resources, and what becomes a priority of the board. You know, if this is a priority, then we have to shift our priorities away from something to this. We don't have extra people to be doing the work for writing the bylaws. So if it's a bylaw that is drafted and then we review it, that's a different story. But starting from scratch and drafting a bylaw, it's an incredible amount of time, and then we still have to go to town council with all of it. So I guess I would just ask for the board, there's 3 on here tonight, I would just ask the board to prioritize and let us know, because we certainly can't take on all 3 at once. We still have some bylaws that we're going to hopefully be bringing
sorry.
back in the fall, for fall town meeting. And some of those bylaws that we brought to the town meeting in May, they were in development for 3 years. So, it takes a long time, so if it's a priority, I guess we just need to know in advance, because they don't get written and done in 6 months. It really is, In some cases, a 2 to 3 year process,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, through the chair, which ones do you want to write before you leave? And which ones do you want to have the
Well, we've already gotten the one where we scratched off the things. I would prioritize the environment. That's me personally. I mean, I want to preserve historic districts. There's just a lot more that's going to go into that one than the biodegradable. Plus, I'm already super familiar with a lot of that. So that would be my priority.
We'll take a motion to table, and with the understanding that you'll come back with a rough draft of the bylaw.
Yeah, so moved to make that motion.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. There's a vote.
All right, last thing. Sorry with the chair. So I'm going to turn to Ed for a lot of this one. I had reached out to Ed to talk about the town's investments to see if we had any control over anything related to the fossil fuel industry. Personally sold off my shares in companies that were part of the fossil fuel industry. And I think it's something that's important to do. Again, it's an environmental measure. So I reached out. We found that there was $100,000. You can correct me if I say anything wrong. $100,000 in mutual funds that have some shares in companies that make money in the fossil fuel industry. So of that $100,000, we would have to move it to mutual funds that did not have any investments in the fossil fuel industry. I recognize that this is a really bad time to sell off, and I know I'm getting ahead of you mentioning that. But I think it's an important thing to do. Plus, we'd be selling while it's high. And again, we don't hold any direct holdings in these companies. It's through mutual funds, so we own partial shares or shares through those funds. At the same time, I don't think in general there's any great benefit to having funds tied to that. If anything, we're watching the country move in the electric vehicle direction, solar, wind, and those stocks have exploded in the last few years. So given, aside from this anomaly, I think this is the direction that the town should move in, and I think it's a direction that we can move in over time. I don't think it's something that we have to do overnight. I don't think we have to call up Bartholomew Investments and say we want everything moved out tomorrow. I think we can have a 5-year, 10-year plan as long as we have a commitment on paper that this is the direction we want to go in. Maybe it's just our policy is we don't want anything moving forward put into anything in the fossil fuel industry, and that could be the case also. But the reason I wanted to talk about it tonight is because Bartholomew Investments had actually said that they'd be willing to be on the call to answer questions, but before wasting their time, I wanted to get the board's temperature, see if everyone is totally opposed to the idea, in which case we wouldn't need to bring them in, or if people are open to it, then maybe we bring them in at our next meeting, ask them some more questions about what it would look like to either do this over a 5-10-year period, 3-5-10-year period, or say from now on, any additional funds going in won't be put into that industry. So with that.
Initial procedural question, really. Is this our jurisdiction, or would this be FinCom, or do they even make decisions? I know that these mutual funds have fund managers that really.
Great question. Statutorily, the custodian of these investments lie under the town treasurer. We do have an investment firm, Bartholomew Investment Firm in the city, that handles our investments. As I understand it, when this was first raised by Selectmen Liberty, I worked with the treasurer, and we contacted Bartholomew Investments to see what level of our investments were tied to the fossil fuel industry. I've been told that 3.5% of our OPEB, which is about, and I don't know if it's broken out into different investments, but 3.5% of our OPEB, and our OPEB is about $5.6 million, is either directly or indirectly tied to the fossil fuel industry. How they made that assessment, I don't know. But that being said, I don't know how that's gonna impact our return on investment if in fact we liquidate those investments and reinvest in something else. So I think there's a short term and a long term, I don't want to say it's a consequence, but it could be an impact on our investments, and that's concerning. Whether or not we can redirect that level of 3.5% to other investments, whether it's going to diminish our return, whether it's not, I think it's important to know. And that's why I think it's important to have that discussion with a representative from Bartholomew, so you as board members can understand that if you do adopt this policy, what impacts we may feel as a result of that. And it may not be adverse, it could be neutral, I don't know. But I know the more you invest in various elements within the market, you're trying to maximize your return on investment. And there is a level of risk that we have to be concerned with too. So there's a lot of moving parts here. And I did have someone available for tonight, but I think Tristan wanted to know the flavor of the board before we made that commitment to bring someone in.
That 3.5% is probably due to all-time high prices. It's not typically positioned at 3.5% of the portfolio, I assume?
That I don't know. So I think, like I said, there's a long-term and a short-term strategy. There may be different maturity dates within the portfolio, and it's structured that way to try to maximize our return based upon the level of risk. We have to operate under certain risk conditions. We can't do what Orange County did in California and put public funds at risk. So there are parameters and protocols that we have to follow.
Do you know how many mutual funds have divested from fossil fuels and if their rate of return is comparable?
Yeah, so I go through Fidelity. I mean, there are mutual funds, Fidelity just breaks it down. There are a ton of mutual funds that specifically, I don't have the app anymore, specifically target green energy. So this isn't a great chart to show in that I just found it before this meeting. And it's one that was created not too long ago through Fidelity. So this is comparing their 500 index fund, which it's the S&P 500. They just rename it so that they don't have to pay the fee to S&P, compared to one that they created, which is the Sustainable World Fund. And you can compare it. I mean, they rise and fall together, but the rate of return, you can tell, is slightly lower just from the investment in green energy. But I can pass that around to everyone. That's just the first two that I found. Without our investment agency here, I wouldn't be able to say like what our options would be to replace it with. They may have better ones, they may have worse ones.
I think in the short term, we can all recognize there's a lot of instability in the market. So I think, when you come up with a strategy, not only do you have to think short term, but you have to think long term to get you through the ups and downs of a volatile market. And I think that's part of the strategy of Bartholomew when they structure something like that for us. They're thinking, beyond today and well into the future to ride out the storm in the event, in the event of these crazy market conditions. I think, personally, I think there's going to be instability for a while. I think we're looking at, maybe 18 up to 36 months, according to some of the financial forecasts that I'm hearing. But it all depends on what's going on, not only in the United States, but what's going on abroad as well, because that definitely has an impact on the market, has an impact on supply and demand. So I think the world market is really the driving force behind what we're seeing today. We just don't know how long that's going to last, but
I support a go forward or something that's tied to not exceeding future investments of 3.5% into those. And I don't know if they're top 5, I don't know how they came up with what the fossil fuels are. Every business is currently using it and buying offsets or whatever, but I'd be okay with discussion on a strategy to say not to exceed what we currently do and look to put future investments elsewhere, and even look what, if the market, if those businesses continue to go up, could we look to reallocate that percentage above the 3.5%? And I say 3.5% because that's the number you threw out. I don't know what the actual number is, but if we said, you know what, as of June 1st, this is what it was, let's not exceed that, go forward.
I do not have that historical data, and I'm sure that the representative from Bartholomew would be helpful in helping all of us understand what that history has been. And certainly, I think if we could bring them in at the next meeting, I think it would be an education for all of us and help you make your decision somewhat easier to make.
So you said that you support setting a cutoff of, say, 3.5%, let's say 4%. Naturally, if that went up, I mean, that would change with the market, even if they didn't add anything to
So if it goes
that.
up in the market, they would have to reallocate
Okay.
a percentage above wherever it stood on that date. So, and again, it wouldn't be, hey, June 1st it was 3.5, and June 8th it's, 4%, we gotta take that off right away. No, like you do it quarterly, you look at it and you reallocate. And I'm assuming you do it quarterly, or Bartholomew does, or whatever, I don't know what they're paid to do, but typically investments will go in whatever their contract is and reallocate based on whatever allocation. So we could say, do not exceed, and I would like to say whatever it is currently, do not exceed this going forward, and next reallocation they get back down to that number.
Would you support a cap on, so even ignoring the 3.5%, saying a cap on what's already there, nothing more will go into that fund? And we're saying, so
Yeah, I'd like to see that strategy. And again, I want to know what those businesses are, because I can say today, top 5 oil companies, fine, but I don't know what all those other companies are that would be considered.
Yeah.
I would just like to remind the board that statutorily, those decisions lie and rest with the town treasurer. Now, certainly you can have some guidance or a policy, but that doesn't mean that those policy decisions are,
Ours to make.
excuse me?
They're not ours to make.
Right.
So
Back to my initial point, yeah.
Even
So-
so then we don't have any authority over this.
Yeah, and I think we have as a town, we have a fiduciary obligation to the taxpayers to make sure we get the maximum return that we can. So if we want to stand our ground and take a position for the environment, I think there's plenty of ways to do it. I don't know if this is one of them, because as environmental policies go forward, all these green policies go forward over time, well, the market will respond to that, and we'll see stocks move based on that. We'll see oil stocks or, these certain stocks go down. But I don't think us driving it will, it's a stand, I guess, but I think we'd probably be breaching our fiduciary obligations to the town to make sure that we have the most responsible budget and the maximum return.
I would be interested to know, and that's why I think it's important to have a rep here, how much of our investments are tied to green energy?
Yeah. Go the other way with it.
Great question.
Yeah. And that may be higher than the fossil fuel industry. I don't know, but we were focused on fossil fuel, and as this discussion is taking place and we're, talking about other elements within the portfolio, I'm sure it's a completely mixed portfolio, so I think we need to know that information.
Yeah, I'd want to talk with them as well and ask those questions. As far as, the treasurer, this would be a financial policy, I would think would go into the financial policy. We'd have to send it to the finance committee, and if approved by them, I think the treasurer would be bound by that. They're also confirmed by the select board, report to the town manager. But, and so the board would have authority in that sense. Now, with regard to chasing after the highest returns and supporting the residents with that, I think the obligation goes well beyond just seeking the highest return. This is something that is an issue that the world's facing, climate change, and saying that we're not going to take action on it, even if it's small in our little sector, because we want to chase the bigger gains, monetary gains, which we don't even know, frankly, right now, if we are chasing the higher monetary gains. So we're just saying that potentially this could be higher monetary gains. I just don't see that as a legitimate reason not to go forward with it. But that's my personal opinion on it. So, yeah, I would definitely love to have them come in and talk. I would have loved to have them in tonight, but again, I didn't want to waste their time having them come in here if everyone was totally against it.
So this board has no oversight over that?
Directly, no. We could write a financial policy. My understanding is we could write a financial policy, send it to the finance committee, have it approved by them, and that would.
We would, through the chair, we would have to check on Mass General Law with regard to the authority of the treasurer. I don't know, our financial policies have been guidelines that we use for developing our budgets, but the treasurer has statutory authority over the investment. So that's, I don't know the answer to that legally. I just don't want to tell the board that that's true. If you have a financial policy, she or he would have to do a certain thing. I don't know that. Because this is the first time we've had the discussion about that. I would want to make sure that we have a lot of discussion with Bartholomew, because again, even though I know we're trying to make statements and do the right thing when it comes to environment, we get that. We're a green community. That's part of what we do. But we also do have a fiduciary responsibility to get not just the highest investment, but the most secure investment. And that, so I think we would have to talk to Bartholomew. I don't know how often or what the term of some of these investments are. Like you said, if you set a percentage cap on it now, and that investment you're in a mutual fund where they're constantly buying new companies and investing in new companies, what kind of control do you have over that? And I don't know the answer, and I think that's what we were trying to say, that I think we all need to talk to Bartholomew to see what that is. But I think further we would need to probably talk to town council and see what is the authority of the board versus the authority of the treasurer.
So should we table that as well?
3 for 3?
And then have Bartholomew come in at our next meeting?
To have them come in, are we going to have the answers of authority at that point as well, or are they just going to give us a download of what the investments are?
Through the chair, they would probably just be able to talk to the investments. I think the interpretation of the authority for the treasurer is probably a town council, or if not, an attorney general question, because you're asking about the interpretation of the law.
So I think I'd like to know that before necessarily talking.
Yeah, we don't know what the parameters of this discussion are yet.
Correct, because I don't want to ask questions that aren't going to ever be controllable, or...
I don't want to bring them in and ask them hypotheticals to which
Correct.
we don't have.
Right.
I'd like to know what that authority is and then have the discussions and see.
We possibly table it until we can have answers from town council?
Do that?
So, just so I'm clear, you want to follow the line of authority and determine that first before you have a discussion with Bartholomew?
I would like that. I don't know what everyone else would
I
like.
agree.
I would agree with that.
I disagree, but I'm in the minority, so I'll go along with it.
Well, I think we could affect change more positively knowing that. Again, I'm not saying what that change is, but without knowing the authority, we are talking hypotheticals on a lot of these. And I do think there's an opportunity to do the right thing on all avenues, but not knowing that authority and not having those things outlined, it doesn't help to have Bartholomew in here and discuss that if we don't know who has what authority.
Yep. All right, so do I have a motion?
Motion to table?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
There's a vote. And We have the meeting minutes in your packets from May 9th and May 23rd. Do we have any questions or edits needed? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It is a vote. Thank you.